I'm Emma Wilson, 29 years old, and I've spent my entire life living in my older sister Olivia's shadow. When Ryan proposed after 3 beautiful years together, I finally had something that was just mine to celebrate. Then came our engagement party, where Olivia grabbed the microphone, announced her pregnancy, and with that infamous smirk said, "Sorry, guess I stole the spotlight again." Everyone laughed while Ryan and I sat in stunned silence. But what happened? Next changed everything. Our revenge came in an envelope, and when she saw our save the date, her screaming phone call told me I'd finally taken back my power. Before I get into all the details, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever dealt with a spotlight-stealing family member, hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this story ends. Growing up as Emma Wilson meant living perpetually in Olivia's shadow. My sister was always exactly 2 years and 3 months older than me, but the gap in our parents' attention and affection stretched far wider than any calendar could measure. From our earliest years, Olivia captivated everyone around her with her natural charisma, striking looks, and effortless achievements. By high school, the pattern was firmly established. Olivia was the golden child who could do no wrong, while I was the afterthought, the also-ran, the Emma, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" child. My parents never tried to hide their favoritism. Mom would rush to Olivia's dance recitals an hour early to get front-row seats, but would frequently check her watch during my piano performances. Dad proudly displayed Olivia's cheerleading, trophies in the living room while my academic awards gathered dust in a drawer somewhere. It wasn't that they didn't love me. They just loved her more visibly, more enthusiastically, more proudly. The pattern of Olivia stealing my moments started early but became painfully predictable as we grew older. When I graduated high school with honors, my small celebration dinner somehow transformed into a congratulatory party for Olivia, who had just been accepted to her first-choice college, the same school that had waitlisted me months earlier. When I landed my first professional job after college, my parents barely acknowledged it because Olivia had just gotten engaged to her college sweetheart Mark. Over time, I developed a protective shell around myself. I learned not to share good news with my family right away, savoring my accomplishments privately before subjecting them to inevitable comparison. I became more self-sufficient, less dependent on family validation, finding worth in my own achievements, rather than waiting for parental approval that never quite materialized. That's probably why Ryan caught me so off guard when we met. He noticed me, truly saw me, in a way my family never had. We met at the marketing firm where we both worked, me in content strategy and him in graphic design. Our collaboration on a major campaign led to coffee meetings that ran long, lunch breaks spent laughing, and eventually, dinner dates where hours would pass like minutes. With Ryan, I never had to compete for attention or prove my worth. He listened. When I spoke, remembered details about my day, and championed my ideas both professionally and personally. After 3 years together, he took me to the summit of Maple Ridge, our favorite hiking spot where we'd spent countless Saturdays discussing everything from childhood dreams to future plans. Against the backdrop of autumn foliage and clear blue skies, he dropped to one knee and promised to spend his life seeing, hearing, and choosing me. For the first time, I felt centered in my own story. Planning our wedding brought me unexpected joy. Each decision, venues, colors, flowers, felt significant because they were ours. Ryan encouraged me to envision exactly what I wanted instead of defaulting to what would please others. We decided to announce our engagement at the next family dinner, and I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, this news would earn genuine celebration. My parents' reaction was predictably lukewarm. Mom's first question was whether we'd set a date yet, quickly followed by concerns about venue availability and catering costs. Dad offered a distracted "congratulations" before returning to a work email on his phone. I had expected this, but Ryan's visible disappointment made it sting anew. Olivia's reaction, however, seemed unexpectedly sincere. She squealed, hugged me tightly, and immediately asked to see the ring. She complimented Ryan's taste and suggested we start a wedding Pinterest board together. "I've been through this whole planning process," she reminded me, twisting her own wedding band. "I can help you avoid all the mistakes I made." For a brief, hopeful moment, I wondered if my wedding might be the thing that finally allowed us to connect as sisters rather than competitors. With our engagement announced, Ryan and I decided to host a formal celebration at the Lakeview, a gorgeous venue overlooking Milton Lake that we'd both fallen in love with. I threw myself into planning with unexpected enthusiasm, determined to create an evening that perfectly represented us as a couple. I selected a color scheme of navy blue and silver, ordered custom floral arrangements featuring white roses and blue hydrangeas, and spent hours curating the perfect playlist. The guest list included about 50 people. Close friends, colleagues we both cherished, Ryan's warm and supportive family, and my more complicated one. Each decision felt meaningful, each choice a building block in the foundation of our life together. Ryan's parents were incredibly supportive throughout the process. His mom, Linda, called weekly just to check if we needed help with anything, and his dad, Thomas, insisted on contributing financially despite our protests. "We've been saving for this since Ryan was born," Thomas confided to me during a Sunday dinner at their home. "We couldn't be happier about who he's chosen." The contrast between their enthusiastic support and my own family's tepid interest was stark, but not surprising. As planning progressed, Olivia's initial supportiveness began showing cracks. What started as helpful suggestions gradually morphed into thinly veiled criticisms. "Navy blue in July? That's an interesting choice," she'd say with a raised eyebrow. Or, "You're having a buffet. I thought sit-down dinners were standard for engagement parties." Each comment came wrapped in just enough concern to sound helpful rather than undermining, but the pattern was familiar. When I showed her the invitation design Ryan and I had created together, she frowned slightly. "It's nice, but wouldn't something more traditional be better?" I still have my stationer's contact information from my wedding. I surprised myself by standing firm. "Ryan and I designed these together. They represent us perfectly, so we're going with them." The slight widening of her eyes told me she wasn't used to this version of me, one who didn't automatically defer to her opinions. Despite Olivia's subtle attempts to take over, I made a conscious effort to include her appropriately. I asked her to make one of the toasts at the party, hoping that giving her a defined role might satisfy her need for attention without letting it overtake the entire event. "I'd be honored," she said, looking genuinely touched, which made me wonder if perhaps I'd been too harsh in my judgment of her intentions. As the weeks passed, I noticed Olivia becoming increasingly secretive. She would abruptly end phone calls when I walked into our parents' house, and twice I caught her whispering with our mother, both of them falling silent when they noticed my presence. I assumed it was wedding-related. Perhaps they were planning a surprise bridal shower or bachelorette party. For once, I allowed myself to believe that Olivia might actually be trying to support me rather than overshadow me. The day of the engagement party arrived with perfect weather, sunny with a gentle breeze, as if nature itself approved of our union. I spent the morning at the salon getting my hair and makeup done, then met Ryan at the venue 2 hours early to oversee the final setup. Everything looked even more beautiful than I had imagined. The lake sparkling beyond floor-to-ceiling windows, tables adorned with floating candles and flower petals, a table displaying photos of Ryan and me throughout. Our relationship. For once in my life, everything felt perfectly aligned. Guests began arriving promptly at 6, offering warm congratulations and admiring the venue. Ryan's extended family came in a cheerful group, bringing beautifully wrapped gifts despite our no-presents request on the invitations. My father arrived precisely on time, looking uncomfortable in his seldom-worn suit. My mother followed 20 minutes later, immediately pointing out a missed spot on one of the windows. By 7 o'clock, everyone had arrived except Olivia and Mark. As the catering manager approached me about delaying dinner service, I felt the familiar flutter of anxiety that accompanied any disruption to carefully laid plans. Just as Ryan was suggesting we begin without them, Olivia made her entrance, looking radiant in a form-fitting emerald dress, her husband Mark following a step behind. She offered no explanation for their tardiness, simply kissing the air near my cheek and complimenting the cute decorations. Something about her demeanor put me on edge, a barely contained excitement that seemed disproportionate to the occasion. Still, I pushed the concern aside, determined to enjoy the celebration Ryan and I had worked so hard to create. The engagement party was everything I'd envisioned, elegant yet welcoming, formal without being stuffy. Soft lighting cast a warm glow over the room, and the sunset painted the lake in shades of orange and pink visible through the windows. The caterers circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres, and the background music, a carefully selected mix of jazz standards and acoustic covers of songs meaningful to Ryan and me, created the perfect atmosphere. I caught Ryan's eye across the room where he was chatting with colleagues from the firm, and the look of pure love and pride on his face made my heart swell. For perhaps the first time in my life, I felt completely present in a moment of joy, not waiting for something to go wrong or for someone to diminish my happiness. After dinner, the planned toasts began. Ryan's father went first, raising his glass to tell the story of how Ryan had called him 5 times before proposing, so nervous about getting everything perfect that he'd forgotten where he hid the ring. The room filled with affectionate laughter, as Thomas concluded with sincere words about welcoming me to their family. My father's toast was briefer, but surprisingly heartfelt, acknowledging that while he wasn't always good at showing it, he was proud of the woman I'd become and the partnership Ryan and I had built. My best friend Caroline spoke next, recounting how I'd called her immediately after my first date with Ryan, already knowing something significant had begun. The toasts were winding down when Olivia suddenly stood and reached for the microphone that had been set on the head table. This wasn't entirely unexpected. She was scheduled to make a toast after all. But something about her expression made my stomach tighten. She tapped the microphone twice, though it was unnecessary in the die. Already quiet room, and smiled broadly. "I know Emma asked me to say a few words about her and Ryan, and I will," she began. "But first, Mark and I have our own exciting news to share." The room fell completely silent, all eyes fixed on my sister. My hand found Ryan's under the table, gripping it tightly. "We're pregnant," Olivia announced, her free hand moving to rest on her still flat stomach. "Baby Thompson will be joining the family in about 6 months." The room erupted in gasps and congratulations. I sat frozen, the words echoing in my head as if from a great distance. And then came the moment that would replay in my mind for months afterward. As the initial exclamations died down, Olivia looked directly at me, a small smirk playing at the corners of her mouth, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Sorry, Emma. Guess I stole the spotlight again." She delivered the line with a lilting, teasing tone that invited others to see it as good-natured sibling banter. And they did. Ripples of laughter spread through the room, guests smiling indulgently at what they perceived as sisterly inside humor. Everyone laughed except me and Ryan. I felt his hand tighten around mine as we exchanged a look of disbelief. In that brief, silent communication, I knew he understood exactly what had happened and felt the same mixture of hurt and anger that was coursing through me. The tenor of the entire party shifted in that moment. My mother rushed to embrace Olivia, tears streaming down her face as she exclaimed about becoming a grandmother. My father awkwardly patted Mark's shoulder, offering congratulations with more animation than he'd shown all evening. Guests who moments earlier had been focused on celebrating our engagement now clustered around my sister, asking about due dates and morning sickness and whether they hoped for a boy or girl. Our engagement party had transformed, in the space of seconds, into Olivia's pregnancy announcement celebration. I maintained my composure through sheer force of will, plastering a smile on my face that felt brittle enough to crack. Ryan stayed, close by my side, occasionally whispering words of support or squeezing my hand to remind me I wasn't alone. But the emotional devastation was complete. As I watched my parents fawning over Olivia, my mother already discussing nursery themes and my father offering financial advice about college savings plans, it was as if I were 8 years old again, standing in the wings of the school auditorium, while Olivia took center stage. Several guests, caught up in the excitement, seemed to forget entirely why they were gathered in the first place. Marjorie, my mother's oldest friend, walked right past me to reach Olivia, gushing about how she'd sensed something different about her glow when she arrived. My own boss, who had known me for 5 years, spent 10 minutes discussing pediatricians with Olivia, whom he'd met exactly twice. Around 9:30, without any formal conclusion to the party we'd planned and paid for, Ryan suggested we leave. No one noticed us gathering our things. No one saw us thank the catering manager and slip him an envelope with his tip. No one watched as we walked out of our own engagement celebration, the centerpiece of our relationship milestone now merely a scenic backdrop for my sister's latest triumph. In the car, the careful composure I'd maintained throughout the evening finally crumbled. Tears flowed freely as Ryan navigated the dark roads toward our apartment, one hand on the wheel and the other holding mine. "I can't believe she did that," I managed between sobs. "Actually, no. That's not true. I absolutely can believe she did that. What I can't believe is that I thought tonight might be different." Ryan's jaw was tight, his normally gentle expression hardened with anger. I rarely saw. "That was calculated, Emma. The timing, the delivery, even that little spotlight comment. She knew exactly what she was doing." He was right, and hearing him validate my feelings only intensified them. This wasn't a case of me being oversensitive or reading too much into things. Patterns my family had often accused me of. An objective witness had seen exactly what I had. "Your parents didn't even try to redirect attention back to us," Ryan continued, his voice quiet but intense. "It's like they completely forgot why everyone was there in the first place." That observation hurt worst of all, because it confirmed what I'd always suspected, but tried to deny. My parents' behavior wasn't accidental oversight, but deliberate choice. They consistently, actively prioritized Olivia's moments over mine. Back at our apartment, we changed out of our formal clothes and sat at our kitchen table with mugs of tea that grew cold as we talked. We dissected the evening from every angle, moving from hurt to anger to a strange sort of clarity. "It's a pattern," I said, finally naming what had shaped my entire life. "And patterns don't change unless something forces them to change." Ryan nodded, adding, "And Olivia gets away with it because there have never been consequences. Why would she stop behavior that's consistently rewarded?" We fell asleep on the couch around 2 a.m, emotionally exhausted. I expected to at least receive some text messages checking on our abrupt departure, but my phone remained silent throughout the night. The next morning brought a flood of notifications, but none expressing concern about us. My mother had created a family group chat titled Baby Thompson Updates with a sonogram picture. My father had texted separately asking if we could move our wedding planning discussion to the following month since "Your sister needs support with her pregnancy right now." Various relatives and friends had sent messages gushing about Olivia's news without a single mention of the engagement party or how it had ended. It was the final confirmation that in my family's eyes, my milestone would always be secondary to any development in Olivia's life. The text that broke me came from my mother at 10:17 a.m. "Emma, your sister's first trimester has been rough, and she'll need family support in the coming months. Have you and Ryan considered postponing the wedding planning until after the baby arrives? It would mean so much to your sister not to feel rushed with all she's going through." The audacity of the suggestion that I should postpone my wedding for a pregnancy that had been deliberately announced to overshadow my engagement left me speechless. I handed the phone to Ryan, who read it and set it down with deliberate care, as if resisting the urge to throw it across the room. "This ends now," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "Our wedding is about us, not your sister, not your parents' preferences, not anyone else's convenience. It's time to take control of our own narrative." We spent the morning discussing options. The most obvious response would be direct confrontation, calling out Olivia's behavior and my parents' enabling of it. But years of family dynamics had taught me that such confrontations inevitably ended with me being labeled oversensitive or jealous. Another option was to exclude Olivia from the wedding entirely, but that would likely result in my parents refusing to attend as well. As we talked, a different approach began to take shape, one that would allow us to celebrate our relationship on our terms while sending a clear message about boundaries. "What if," Ryan suggested, "we completely change the type of wedding we're having? Something that would make it difficult or impossible for Olivia to overshadow us again?" The idea took root and blossomed as we discussed it. We had originally planned a traditional local wedding with about 150 guests. What if, instead, we opted for a destination wedding? Something intimate, with limited guest capacity and restrictions that would naturally exclude certain people, including perhaps a sister who would be 7 months pregnant by our preferred date. The more we talked, the more right it felt. We spent the afternoon researching destination wedding locations, costs, and logistics. We calculated that with the money we'd save on a large local reception, we could afford a beautiful ceremony in a stunning international location. By dinner time, we had settled on Santorini, Greece, a place we'd both dreamed of visiting, with whitewashed buildings against the blue Mediterranean that would make a perfect backdrop for our vows. We contacted a wedding planner specializing in destination ceremonies, explaining our vision for an intimate gathering of no more than 30 people. When she asked about our timeline, we were firm. We wanted to be married within 6 months, before Olivia would be due. The most satisfying part of our plan came in designing the save the dates. We worked with a graphic designer friend to create elegant cards that conveyed not just information, but a specific message. I felt a complicated mix of emotions as we finalized the wording. Sadness that family dynamics had forced such measures, but also a growing sense of empowerment. For once, I was making choices based solely on what Ryan and I wanted, not on accommodating my family's expectations or Olivia's perpetual spotlight. As I clicked approve on the final design, I realized that this was perhaps the first major decision of my adult life made entirely without consideration of how my family would react. The freedom in that realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. The save the date cards were works of art, heavy cream cardstock with a vellum overlay, embossed with a delicate watercolor illustration of Santorini's iconic blue domes and whitewashed buildings against a sunset sky. The wording, however, was the true masterpiece. After multiple drafts and careful consideration of every phrase, we settled on text that was both elegant and unmistakable in its intent. Emma Wilson and Ryan Campbell invite you to celebrate their love with an intimate destination wedding in Santorini, Greece on January 15th. Due to venue restrictions and our desire for a private celebration, we've limited our guest list to 30 close friends and immediate family. No plus ones, no children or infants permitted at any wedding events. While this may mean some loved ones cannot attend, we hope you understand this is our special day. Formal invitation to follow for those who can join our celebration. We included a personal note in each envelope stating that we understood the financial and logistical challenges of attending a destination wedding, and that we would celebrate with a casual reception later in the year for those unable to make the journey. The subtext was clear to anyone who knew the situation. Olivia, at 7 months pregnant by our wedding date, would not be able to fly to Greece, and even if she gave birth early, the no infants policy would prevent her from bringing her newborn. Our wedding would be completely Olivia-proof. We worked with our wedding planner to ensure these restrictions would be strictly enforced. She assured us that the boutique hotel we'd selected as our venue regularly hosted adults-only events and had staff experienced in politely but firmly turning away anyone who didn't comply with stated policies. We discussed every potential scenario, including the possibility that my parents might try to pressure us into making an exception. The planner suggested adding password protection to all vendor communications to prevent unauthorized changes, a precaution that seemed extreme until I remembered how my mother had once adjusted my college application essays because she knew better. What admissions officers wanted to hear. With the venue secured and the rules established, we turned our attention to the guest list. This was perhaps the most cathartic part of the process. Instead of the obligatory family invitations that would have dominated a traditional wedding, we selected only people who had genuinely supported our relationship. Ryan's parents and his brother topped the list, along with a handful of aunts, uncles, and cousins who had always treated me as family. From my side, I included my father, giving him the benefit of the doubt that he might choose to support me independently of my mother's decisions. I also included 2 distant cousins who had always been kind to me. My mother and Olivia made the list too, not because I particularly wanted them there, but because excluding them outright would have escalated the situation beyond what I was prepared to handle. The rest of our guest list consisted of close friends who had celebrated our relationship from the beginning and colleagues who had become genuine friends. In our wedding planning meetings, we made a conscious decision to exclude any mention of pregnancy or babies from all aspects of our celebration. There would be no accommodations made for Olivia's condition, no adjustments to the timeline, no special meal considerations. Any traditional wedding elements that might allow Olivia to insert herself into the spotlight, like a large bridal party with a matron of honor role she might expect, were eliminated in favor of a simple ceremony, focusing solely on Ryan and me. We decided to send the save the dates exactly 1 week after the engagement party, timing that would make the connection between the 2 events impossible to miss. The morning we planned to mail them, I felt a moment of hesitation. Was this petty? Was I stooping to Olivia's level by orchestrating such a deliberate response to her announcement? Ryan sensed my uncertainty. "This isn't about revenge," he reminded me gently. "It's about setting boundaries and creating a wedding day that's true to us. You deserve to be the center of attention at your own wedding, Emma." His words reinforced what I was slowly coming to believe, that wanting my moment after a lifetime of yielding the spotlight wasn't selfish or petty, it was healthy. I addressed each envelope by hand, a task that felt ceremonial. With each name I wrote, I was consciously choosing the community that would witness and celebrate our commitment. When I wrote Olivia and Mark Thompson on their envelope, my hand didn't shake. I felt calm, resolved. We drove together to the post office and dropped the stack of envelopes into the mailbox. As they slid from my fingers, I felt a weight lifting. Not just the physical weight of the cards, but the heavier burden of always accommodating others at my own expense. The wait for responses began. 3 days after mailing the save the dates, we received our first enthusiastic RSVP from Ryan's brother Josh, who texted a photo of himself holding the card with a thumbs up and the message, "Already booking my flight. So excited for you guys." Other positive responses followed quickly. Friends who loved the idea of combining our wedding with a Greek vacation, colleagues who appreciated the adults-only policy, Ryan's extended family members who immediately started researching Greek, customs to incorporate into their attire or gifts. My father called 5 days after the cards went out, his tone confused rather than angry. "Emma, your mother and I just received your save the date. Greece? In January? Don't you think that's going to be difficult for a lot of people?" His focus on "a lot of people," rather than specifically mentioning Olivia, told me he was trying to avoid the obvious conflict. "Ryan and I want an intimate destination wedding," I replied calmly. We understand not everyone will be able to attend, and we're completely fine with that. There was a long pause before he asked, "And the no children policy? You know your sister will have a newborn by then if she gives birth early." "The venue has strict policies," I answered, the half-truth coming easily. "And honestly, Dad, Ryan and I want a child-free celebration where all our guests can fully enjoy themselves, without distractions." Another pause, longer this time. "Your mother isn't happy about this. She thinks you're being inconsiderate of your sister's condition." I took a deep breath, steadying myself before responding. "This is our wedding, Dad. We're planning it in the way that feels right for us. I hope you'll be there, but I understand if you can't." The conversation ended shortly after, with my father promising to think about it. I hung up feeling stronger than I had expected. I had stated my boundaries clearly and calmly, without apologizing or backing down. The die was cast. All that remained was to wait for the inevitable storm that would follow. Ryan and I were spending a quiet Sunday evening at home, curled up on the couch with takeout and a movie, when my phone began vibrating violently against the coffee table. Olivia's name and photo flashed on the screen, and Ryan paused the movie, without me having to ask. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but something in me knew that postponing this confrontation wouldn't make it any easier. I picked up the phone and had barely said hello before Olivia's voice came through, so loud that I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "What the hell, Emma? Greece? In January? Are you freaking kidding me?" Her words tumbled out in a screaming tirade that made it clear she'd been stewing on this for hours, possibly days. "You know I can't fly internationally when I'm 7 months pregnant. No airline would even let me on the plane. And a no infants policy? So even if I give birth early, I can't bring my baby? What kind of sister plans a wedding knowing her own sister and niece or nephew can't be there?" I waited for her to pause for breath before responding, my voice deliberately calm and measured. "Hello to you too, Olivia. Yes, Ryan and I are getting married in Santorini. We're very excited about it." My controlled tone seemed to infuriate her further. "Don't play dumb with me, Emma. You did this on purpose. This is about the engagement party, isn't it? You're being petty and spiteful because you're jealous of my pregnancy announcement." And there it was. The familiar accusation that had followed me throughout our relationship. Any negative reaction to Olivia's behavior was always framed as my jealousy, never her inconsideration. "I'm not playing dumb," I replied, feeling Ryan's supportive hand on my shoulder. "Ryan and I decided on the wedding that would make us happiest. That's what wedding planning is supposed to be about, right? The couple's preferences." There was a moment of stunned silence before Olivia switched tactics. "Mom is heartbroken. She's been crying for 2 days. Is that what you wanted? To hurt our mother because you're having some childish tantrum?" The emotional manipulation was so transparent that I almost laughed. "I'm sorry Mom is upset. That wasn't my intention. But Ryan and I are still having the wedding we want." I paused, then decided to address the elephant in the room directly. "And speaking of intentions, let's talk about the engagement party. You announced your pregnancy in the middle of an event specifically celebrating our engagement, then literally said you were stealing the spotlight." Again. Olivia's scoff was audible through the phone. "Oh my God, it was just a joke. Everyone thought it was funny except you. You're overreacting as usual. Mark and I had just gotten the confirmation from the doctor that day. We were excited and wanted to share with family while everyone was together. It wasn't some calculated plot against you." The casual dismissal of her actions that had deeply hurt me, ignited something in my chest. For perhaps the first time in our adult relationship, I found myself unwilling to accept her version of events as definitive. "It wasn't a joke to me, Olivia. And it wasn't the first time. My entire life has been spent watching you take center stage at moments that should have been mine. My high school graduation dinner became about your college acceptance. My promotion. Celebration turned into a congratulations party for your engagement. Every accomplishment I've ever had has somehow become secondary to whatever is happening in your life. And our parents have enabled it every time. My voice remained steady, but I could hear the years of accumulated hurt beneath the words. Continued. So yes, Ryan and I chose a wedding venue and date that would work for us. We chose restrictions that would create the exact atmosphere we want for our celebration. If that means some people can't attend, we're fine with that. The line went silent for so long, I thought she might have hung up. When Olivia finally spoke again, her voice had shifted from anger to a threatening calm. You know, if you do this, Mom won't come. She's already said she won't leave me that late in my pregnancy to fly halfway around the world for what's clearly intended as a slap in our faces. I had anticipated this threat, had prepared myself for it, but it still stung. That's her choice to make, I said simply. Just like this is mine and Ryan's choice. Olivia's voice turned venomous. You're choosing your fiancé over your family. You're ruining relationships that have existed your entire life because you can't stand not being the center of attention for once. The irony of her accusation was so perfect it almost felt scripted. In that moment, I recognized that nothing I could say would make Olivia see the situation from my perspective. She was too invested in her version of reality, one where her needs and feelings always took precedence. This is my wedding, my choice, I said finally. You made yours at the engagement party. The silence that followed carried the weight of decades of unbalanced relationship dynamics. When Olivia spoke again, her tone was one I'd never heard directed at me before, uncertainty mixed with something that sounded almost like respect. I never thought you'd actually stand up to me, she said quietly. I didn't think you had it in you. Before I could respond, she ended the call. The aftermath was swift and predictable. Olivia blocked me on all social media platforms and stopped responding to text messages. My mother called daily for a week, alternating between tearful pleas and angry demands that I change our wedding plans for the sake of family harmony. My father maintained an uncomfortable neutrality, unwilling to directly challenge my decision, but equally unwilling to openly support it. Extended family members took sides, with most aligning with Olivia, the natural outcome of years of family dynamics that had established her as the priority. Through it all, Ryan and I stood firm together. Each time I wavered, wondering if I was making a mistake by potentially fracturing my family over a wedding venue, he gently reminded me that healthy relationships required mutual respect, something my family had rarely offered me. With each passing day, I found myself growing more comfortable with our decision and more confident in my right to prioritize my own happiness, even when it inconvenienced others. It was a lesson long overdue. 6 months later, I stood on a terrace overlooking the Aegean Sea, the January sun casting a golden glow over Santorini's iconic landscape. Despite the winter season, the weather was mild and clear, perfect for the intimate wedding we had envisioned. Behind me, our small gathering of guests chatted quietly as they took their seats for the ceremony. Ryan was somewhere inside with his brother, preparing for our first look. Everything had come together exactly as we'd planned, though the path to this moment had been far from smooth. 3 weeks after the confrontation with Olivia, I had received an unexpected letter, actual paper mail, not an email or text, from my father. Inside the envelope was a 5-page handwritten letter that began with the words, "I've been a coward, and I'm sorry." What followed was a painful but honest reflection on his role in enabling the dysfunctional dynamics between Olivia and me. He acknowledged how he and my mother had consistently prioritized Olivia's needs and moments over mine, not out of a difference in love, but because Olivia's more demanding personality had simply been louder, more insistent. "The squeaky wheel gets the grease," he wrote, and I never stopped to consider what that meant for the wheel that didn't squeak. The letter continued with specific memories, times when he had seen the hurt in my eyes, but had chosen the path of least resistance by giving in to Olivia's demands. He expressed deep regret for the engagement party incident, admitting that he should have redirected attention back to Ryan and me instead of getting caught up in Olivia's announcement. Most surprisingly, the letter concluded with his promise to attend our wedding in Santorini, regardless of whether my mother and sister chose to come. "This is your day," he wrote, "and I want to be there to witness it, even if it means traveling alone." His letter marked the beginning of a slow, tentative healing process. While my mother maintained her position that she couldn't possibly leave Olivia so late in her pregnancy, and Olivia herself continued to ignore my existence, my father and I began building a relationship independent of the rest of the family. We had weekly phone calls where we talked more openly than we ever had before. He asked questions about my life and actually listened to the answers. He shared stories from his own youth that helped me understand how his family patterns had shaped his parenting. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. Decades of established dynamics couldn't be undone in months, but it was a beginning. Ryan's parents were magnificent throughout the process. Linda called regularly just to check on my emotional well-being, never pushing for details but always making it clear she was available to listen. Thomas used his frequent business trips to accidentally be in our city more often, showing up with takeout and funny stories that provided welcome distraction. They never criticized my family directly, but their consistent support made the contrast between healthy and unhealthy family dynamics impossible to ignore. The wedding planning continued without drama. Our Greek wedding planner handled everything with efficiency and warmth, sending weekly updates with photos of venue preparations and menu tastings performed by proxy. When we arrived in Santorini 5 days before the ceremony, every detail had been perfectly arranged, down to the local wildflowers in our suite that matched our wedding colors. On the morning of our wedding, I felt a strange sense of peace. The anxiety that had accompanied every previous significant event in my life, the certainty that something would happen to diminish my joy, was noticeably absent. With Olivia literally an ocean away, there was no possibility of her stealing this spotlight. The ceremony itself was breathtaking in its simplicity and intimacy. We exchanged vows on a cliffside terrace as the winter sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I wore a simple silk gown that caught the breeze off the sea, and Ryan couldn't stop smiling as he promised to continue seeing and choosing me every day for the rest of our lives. When it came time for toasts at the reception, my father stood with visible nervousness. He cleared his throat twice before beginning, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "I've failed Emma many times throughout her life," he said openly, causing a ripple of surprised murmurs among guests who weren't aware of our family situation. I allowed patterns to continue that should have been broken. I missed opportunities to celebrate her uniqueness because I was too busy managing someone else's needs. He looked directly at me as he continued, "But watching her stand firm in what she wants and deserves has taught me that it's never too late to change those patterns. Emma, I am so proud of the strong woman you've become, often without the support you should have had. And Ryan," he turned to my new husband, "thank you for loving my daughter the way she deserves to be loved, completely and without competition." There wasn't a dry eye at our small reception as he concluded, "To Emma and Ryan, may your life together be filled with moments where you both feel fully seen and celebrated." 6 months after our wedding, Olivia gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Despite our ongoing estrangement, I sent a carefully selected gift, a beautiful handmade blanket and a children's book about the special bond between aunts and nieces. I included a simple note: "Congratulations on your new arrival. Whatever has passed between us, I would like to know my niece. When you're ready, I'm here." It was an olive branch extended without expectation, a sign that while I had learned to set boundaries, I hadn't closed the door completely. To my surprise, Olivia sent a brief text 2 weeks later with a photo of the baby wrapped in the blanket I had sent. No words accompanied the image, but it was a start. my mother remained more resistant to the new boundaries I had established. Our conversations were infrequent and strained, each of us carefully avoiding any topic that might lead to conflict. But even she eventually began making small efforts, remembering to ask about Ryan's work promotion, sending a housewarming gift when we bought our first home a year after our wedding, occasionally mentioning things from my childhood that showed she had been paying more attention than I'd realized. The healing wasn't dramatic or complete, but it was real. The most significant change, however, was within myself. Learning to stand firm in my own worth, to believe that my moments deserved celebration and my boundaries deserved respect, transformed how I moved through the world. I became more confident at work, more honest in friendships, more open with Ryan about my needs and desires. I stopped apologizing for taking up space, for having preferences, for existing fully as myself. Looking back now, I realized that what had seemed like revenge, the carefully crafted save-the-date strategy, had actually been the first step toward something much more valuable: freedom. Freedom from patterns that had constrained me my entire life. Freedom to create relationships based on mutual respect rather than historical dynamics. Freedom to define family not just by blood, but by how people treated each other. So what's the lesson in all of this? I think it's that sometimes standing up for yourself feels selfish only because you've been conditioned to always put yourself last. Sometimes creating distance from toxic patterns feels wrong only because those patterns have been normalized throughout your life. And sometimes the people who react most negatively to your boundaries are the ones who benefited most from your lack of them. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? How did you handle the fallout? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories about navigating complicated family relationships and finding your own voice. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to create the life they want, even when it disappoints others. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you deserve to be the main character in your own life.